On August 18, 2002, at 6:40 p.m., two brothers walked into Pisgah National Forest and never came back out. The Harrow family home sat just outside the tree line near the small town of Redford, North Carolina. By 9:15 p.m., the storm sirens were screaming and the power was out across town. By 11 p.m., both of their phones had gone silent. Ethan was 24. Ryan was 21. Search teams would later say that night turned the forest into a maze of falling timber and flash floods. 11 years later, road crews opening a new service route would uncover something that forced the case back open. The question is, what really happened to Ethan and Ryan Harrow? To understand that night, you have to picture how ordinary it looked at first. A late summer Sunday, trail volunteers checking erosion damage before peak hiking season. Weather radio mentioning scattered thunderstorms, nothing more. Ethan signed out at the ranger station a little after 3 p.m. He wrote, "Loop check with Ryan," on the log, then headed for the gravel lot. Security cameras caught the brothers walking past the station kiosk. Packs light, no camping gear. They looked like they expected to be back for dinner. Redford was used to storms rolling over the Blue Ridge. People there trusted the weather, and they trusted the Harrow brothers inside that weather even more. Both men knew the trail system better than some seasonal staff. When they were 20 minutes late for a check-in call, no one panicked. When they were an hour late, their parents started dialing, then assumed a dead zone. What makes this story different is what did not happen next. No panicked voicemail. No texts asking for help. No witness who saw them turn around. It is as if, somewhere between the ranger station and the ridge line, the Harrow brothers stepped off the map entirely. Official reports would soon blame the weather and the terrain. On paper, it looked like another wilderness accident in a dangerous year. But internal emails, radio logs, and one overlooked entry in the trailhead notebook hint at a different sequence of events. If those records are right, Ethan and Ryan were not the only ones in the forest that day. Ethan Harrow did not look like someone who could vanish without a trace. By 24, he had already left Redford once, tried college in Asheville, then come back when the money ran out. He picked up seasonal work guiding day hikes and teaching basic survival skills at a small outdoor center just off Highway 276. His certifications were current: wilderness first aid, CPR, trail safety. On paper, he was the kind of person people trusted to keep others alive in rough country. Ryan, at 21, was still enrolled at Western Carolina University. He came home most weekends in the summer to help with trail work and to save on rent. His friends said he treated knot tying like a sport. He posted short videos showing specialized friction hitches and rescue knots on a private forum for climbing hobbyists. Investigators would later note that some of those screen names matched user IDs on a separate message board visited by a man they had never heard of in 2002. At home, the Harrow brothers were the only children left. Mark and Diane had lost a baby girl to a medical complication years earlier. After that, they became careful without being overprotective. No curfew for grown sons, but clear expectations. Check in before dark during storm season. Leave a route plan on the kitchen table. Carry a radio when you could. Their closest friend in that world was Tyler Hayes, 22, who had grown up on the same street. He and Ethan shared weekend jobs at the outdoor center. Tyler later told investigators that Ethan kept a small notebook listing unofficial side trails, game paths, and unmarked rock shelters. It was not part of any sanctioned mapping project. Ethan just liked knowing where things were before anyone else did. If you follow unsolved disappearances and long cold investigations, consider subscribing so you do not miss where this case goes next. In the weeks before they disappeared, Ethan and Ryan fell into a tight routine. Early morning maintenance hikes, afternoon shifts at the center, evening check-ins at home or at a local bar where staff met after work. Nothing in phone records, bank activity, or witness statements shows a sudden crisis or secret plan. Yet one entry in Ethan's private trail notebook, dated 3 days before the storm, stands out for a different reason. On Sunday, August 18, 2002, the day started like dozens of others that summer. At 2:48 p.m., Ethan clocked out of the outdoor center on the edge of Redford and met Ryan in the parking lot. Security footage shows them loading 2 small day packs into Ethan's Subaru. No tent, no stove, just light gear and a coil of red accessory cord Ryan kept clipped to his belt. At 3:17 p.m., Ethan signed the trail register at the Pisgah Ranger Station. Under route, he wrote a short note in his usual block letters. Ridge loop, erosion check, back before dark. Between 4 o'clock and 6 p.m., cell tower records place Ethan's phone moving steadily south along the gravel service road, then dropping off as the signal faded into the interior of Pisgah National Forest. There are no outgoing calls, but at 6:09 p.m. a text draft on Ryan's phone is started and never sent. It reads, "Found that hollow again. Looks deeper on the left side." Investigators would later recover it from a forensic extraction. The timestamp becomes one of the last reliable markers of their movement. At 7:05 p.m., a severe thunderstorm warning is issued for Transylvania County, including Redford and the surrounding forest. Mark and Diane hear the alert on a battery radio in their kitchen. They assume their sons are already heading back toward the trailhead. At 7:32 p.m., Ethan misses a scheduled radio check with a part-time ranger he often assisted. The ranger logs the missed call, but does not escalate it. In his experience, batteries die and schedules slip when people who know the trails are involved. By 8:20 p.m., lightning is hitting ridgelines above town. Neighbors see the Harrow house lights flicker, then go out with the first wave of outages. At 8:47 p.m., Diane dials Ethan's cell twice. Both calls go straight to voicemail. She calls Ryan's phone at 9:02 p.m. It rings 4 times, then drops. That incomplete connection will bother her for years. The formal search will not begin until dawn, but one small choice that night quietly narrows their chances long before anyone steps into the storm. At first light on August 19, 2002, the search for Ethan and Ryan Harrow began from the Pisgah Ranger Station. Deputies, park rangers, and volunteer teams assembled in the gravel lot, working off a simple assumption. 2 experienced hikers had been caught out by a fast storm and delayed, possibly injured, somewhere along the ridge loop Ethan had logged the day before. Tyler Hayes arrived before 7 a.m. He told deputies there was more they needed to know. Tyler explained that 3 days earlier, during a maintenance hike, the brothers had shown him a shallow rock hollow off any marked trail. It was a small overhang with a packed dirt floor and a narrow opening on one side. Ethan joked that it would make a perfect illegal campsite if anyone ever wanted to disappear for a night. Tyler said Ethan planned to swing by and check it on the Sunday run, in case someone was leaving trash or starting unauthorized fire rings. The search plan changed on the spot. 2 teams were still assigned to the official loop. A 3rd team, including Tyler, was sent toward the unmarked hollow. It took them hours to fight through fresh blowdowns and debris. When they reached the area around midday, the landscape did not match Tyler's memory. What had been a stable slope now showed a ragged channel gouged by water. Chunks of soil and rock had been torn away. Several small trees were uprooted and jammed together at the base of the gully. The overhang was still there, but its entrance was partially blocked by a cone of wet earth and broken branches. Inside, the floor was coated with a new layer of pale silt. Rangers noted a clear water line on the rock wall, nearly 5 feet up from the floor. Whatever passed through this spot during the storm had turned the hollow into a temporary chute. Near the entrance, one of the searchers noticed something tied around a sapling root. It was a length of red accessory cord, the same brand and color Ryan often carried. The cord had been worked into a specific friction hitch that was not common. When investigators later compared it to the knots in Ryan's climbing photos, the pattern matched exactly. For the search command, the knot was read as proof the brothers reached the hollow and were then overwhelmed by floodwater. The decision to treat what they saw here as a tragic accident would shape every step that followed. On October 3, 2013, just after 2:20 p.m., a road crew contracted by the state was cutting a new service corridor above Redford. The plan was simple: clear a narrow track through a remote section of Pisgah National Forest for power line access. The work zone set almost 5 miles beyond the farthest point searched in 2002. For most of the crew, the Harrow case was a name they barely remembered from old news clips. The operator that day was a 40-year-old equipment driver named Ben Holloway. He had been running heavy machinery in western North Carolina for nearly 2 decades. Around 2:37 p.m., as his dozer crawled across a shallow depression, the blade hit something that did not feel like rock or root. The impact jolted the cab and sent a sharp, hollow clang up through the frame. Ben killed the engine and climbed down. Beneath a thin layer of soil, needles, and rotten branches, he found a flat sheet of rusted metal. It was not scrap. As the crew scraped away more debris with shovels, the outline of a square panel with rounded corners appeared. There was a recessed handle on one side, and the faint suggestion of hinges on the other. One worker thought it might be an old septic tank cover or part of a buried fuel system. Another said they should just push dirt back over it and keep moving if they wanted to finish on schedule. Ben refused. The location did not match any utility map posted in the job trailer. There were no recorded structures, no abandoned homesteads, and no reason for a steel hatch to sit in undisturbed forest this far from a road. At 3:12 p.m., he drove his pickup back down the rough access track until his phone picked up a signal, then called the Transylvania County Sheriff's Office. Deputies arrived on scene after 4 p.m. and immediately ordered the crew to stop work within a marked perimeter. Photos taken that evening show the metal square sitting flush in the ground, surrounded by fresh shovel marks. When officers pried the hatch open with a crowbar, a column of cool, stale air rose from a dark shaft only a few feet wide. What their flashlights picked up below forced the Harrow file out of storage and back onto an active investigator's desk. The shaft led down a short ladder into the top of a buried metal box. Deputies and state investigators went first, with air monitors and masks. Their flashlights hit a narrow corridor, then widened into a space that filled the length of a shipping container. It was roughly 40 feet long, 8 feet wide, and low enough that taller agents had to duck. This was not a temporary shelter. Someone had put real work into turning it into a place where people could live for a long time. On the left, 2 steel bed frames were welded to the floor. The mattresses on top were sunken and stained from years of moisture. On the right, a plywood shelf held stacks of empty food cans, plastic water jugs, and a few metal spoons. In the far corner, a plastic bucket with a crude lid told investigators what the plumbing situation had been. Overhead, 2 fluorescent fixtures hung from the ceiling, wired to an electrical line that ran out through the wall and into the dirt. What drew attention next was the pattern of the trash. Labels on the cans and bottles showed production dates between 2002 and 2006. A torn wall calendar, tacked crookedly near one bed, stopped at April 2005. On a small crate beside the other bed lay a warped paperback on wilderness medicine and a local guidebook for trails in Pisgah and the Blue Ridge Parkway. Library stickers on the inside covers traced both books back to the Redford branch. Near the foot of the second bed, one of the evidence techs noticed a flash of color in the decayed fabric. He pulled out a short length of red cord threaded through a small, dull metal ring. The cord was knotted in a way that was not random. It used the same style of hitch that showed up again and again in Ryan Harrow's climbing photos and online forum posts. In several of those old images, Ryan wore a red cord bracelet built around a single metal ring. Back at the command post, an investigator compared the recovered item to a close-up from a 2002 missing person flyer. The shape of the ring and the way the knot sat against his wrist were nearly identical. The container in the forest was no longer just an anonymous bunker. It was now a probable crime scene tied directly to Ethan and Ryan Harrow. The next question was who had built it and how no one noticed for 11 years. No one walked out of that container alive. There was no rescued witness to explain what happened inside or how long it went on. For investigators, the only voices available were in old documents, logs, and memos that had sat untouched for more than a decade. The FBI requested every record tied to the 2002 search from the Transylvania County Sheriff's Office and the Pisgah Ranger District. What came back filled several bankers' boxes. There were daily situation reports from the Harrow search, radio traffic transcripts, maps marked in red grease pencil, and lists of volunteers. One early report, dated August 20th, 2002, noted area of unstable slope above unmarked hollow, but recommended against sending additional teams there due to risk of secondary slides. That line would become important later. Another section of the file held handwritten notes from a veteran ranger who had argued, in a margin comment, that the search zone was too tight for this terrain. A separate packet contained land use records that no one had tied to the case in 2002. In 1999, the state had issued a limited lease to a small aggregate company allowing them to stage equipment and dig test pits in a sector of forest south of Redford. The lease expired in 2001. The buried container would eventually be found just inside that old lease boundary. Back then, commanders treated the area as low priority. They assumed heavy machinery and human activity had not been present long enough to matter. Years later, a freelance writer who followed cold cases filed a public records request for the full Harrow file and the mapping data. When those materials arrived, he laid the 2002 search grids over updated topographic images. What he saw was simple and disturbing. The southern edge of the grid stopped several hundred yards short of where the container was ultimately uncovered. The piece of land that mattered most was never searched in any organized way. The bunker in the woods had been sitting just beyond the red lines on their maps, hidden not only by trees and soil, but by the limits of the original search plan. From the moment the container was identified as a likely Harrow crime scene, investigators looked first at the obvious suspects. The old lease records pointed straight to a small company called Ridgestone Aggregate. Between 1999 and 2001, Ridgestone had permission to stage heavy equipment and dig test pits in the exact sector where the bunker lay. They had owned bulldozers, excavators, and haul trucks. On paper, they had everything needed to bury a 40-foot steel box. Former employees described Ridgestone in blunt terms. Corners were cut. Safety rules were treated as suggestions. A few workers told deputies that drums of unknown material were sometimes buried on site rather than hauled away. One man talked about a supervisor who bragged that the forest eats everything if you go deep enough. Environmental regulators could not confirm those claims, but they matched earlier rumors in county files. The focus quickly narrowed to Ridgestone's field foreman in 2001, a man named Dale Kincaid. He had a criminal history that included assault charges and a restraining order from a prior relationship. Witnesses said he was quick to threaten anyone who questioned him. When photos of the container interior were laid out, the theory sounded simple. Two hikers stumble into an illegal dumping area. Kincaid panics, locks them in a buried container, and walks away. FBI behavioral analysts pushed back almost immediately. The interior did not match a quick cover-up. There were 2 beds, long-term food stocks, and reading material. Calendar pages showed time passing. Someone had planned to keep people here for months, maybe years. That did not fit a spontaneous reaction by a foreman who just wanted a problem to disappear. Agents still had to clear Kincaid. They pulled his financial records, work logs, and travel history from the summer of 2002. Kincaid insisted he had been at a heavy equipment auction in Tennessee the weekend Ethan and Ryan vanished. Receipts from a motel and fuel stops supported that claim. Auction staff remembered him there, loud and hard to miss. The time and distance made it almost impossible for him to have grabbed the brothers in Pisgah and gotten back. With Ridgestone and Kincaid dropping down the list, investigators were left with a more disturbing possibility. The container looked less like a panic decision and more like a private project. They still had not asked who engineered the air inside that box. The air system inside the buried container was the detail that changed everything. Investigators noticed it on the first walk through, but did not understand how unusual it was until specialists were brought in. This was not a simple vent pipe and a cheap fan. Heavy gauge ductwork ran along the ceiling, disappeared into the soil, and resurfaced tens of yards away in a stand of brush. At the far end, hidden in rocks and deadfall, were 2 screened openings that blended into the hillside. Back inside, technicians found 2 inline fans mounted in metal housings above the bunks. Both were commercial grade, the kind used in hospitals, labs, or large office systems. Each still carried a corroded manufacturer's plate with model numbers and partial serial numbers. Near them sat a rusted frame with what had once been a HEPA filter. It was a strange choice for a survival bunker. It made more sense for someone trained to keep air moving in sealed spaces. The FBI contacted the manufacturer and asked for historical sales records on that exact fan and filter combination. The company referred them to 3 regional distributors that had handled those products in the Southeast between 1998 and 2003. 2 had gone out of business and kept no detailed records. The third still stored old invoices on microfilm. Agents spent days at a warehouse in Asheville, scrolling through reels of tiny print. They focused on purchases made between 2000 and 2002 within driving distance of Redford. Most entries listed businesses, schools, or hospitals. A few were cash sales to individuals. One invoice from March 2001 stood out. It listed 2 inline fans of the same model for HEPA filters and assorted duct fittings. The buyer of record was Calvin Mercer, with no company name and a billing address in neighboring Haywood County. A quick background check on Mercer raised more questions. He ran a one-man HVAC business, specializing in custom systems for older buildings. He had done subcontract work for Ridgestone Aggregate when they needed climate control repairs on heavy equipment cabs. He also held small service contracts for remote utility stations scattered along the forest edge. Mercer knew how to move equipment into rough terrain without attracting crowds. Phone records showed another link. Years earlier, his home number appeared in the contact list of the outdoor program, where Ethan occasionally taught safety classes. By late 2013, Calvin Mercer was no longer just a name on an old invoice. Agents from the FBI and the sheriff's office put him under quiet surveillance. He lived alone in a small house outside Canton, North Carolina, about 40 minutes from Redford. Most days he left in a white work van with his business name stenciled on the side, drove job to job, and came home before dark. He had no obvious close friends, no visible family coming and going, and no criminal record beyond minor traffic offenses. Investigators built a warrant package around the ventilation components, the microfilm invoice, his work for Ridgestone, and the contact links to the outdoor center. A federal judge approved a search of his residence, vehicles, and outbuildings. The entry team hit his property just after 6 a.m. on a weekday. Mercer answered the door in work clothes, keys in his hand, as if he were about to leave for a call. Inside, the main living space looked ordinary. The real focus was the detached workshop behind the house. It was packed with ductwork, motors, compressors, and tool racks, all neatly labeled. In a metal filing cabinet, between tax records and equipment manuals, agents found a set of hand-drawn plans. Each page showed a rectangular container buried below grade, with precise measurements, ladder placement, and a split ventilation line that matched the system in the forest. On another shelf, they located a folder of rental contracts from a heavy equipment company based 2 counties away. One agreement, dated April 2001, listed a tracked excavator and a small bulldozer rented to Calvin Mercer for 3 days, with delivery to a rural drop point near the Pisgah boundary. The payment had been made in cash. Mercer had never declared that expense on his business taxes. The most disturbing items were in a taped cardboard box in the attic above the workshop. Inside were spiral notebooks and loose letters written over several years. Many were addressed only to E and R. The pages described an isolated underground home, strict rules about going outside, and a plan to keep us together where no one can interfere. There were no direct admissions, but the themes matched the layout and contents of the buried container. Calvin Mercer was arrested on the spot and transported to a federal facility for questioning while prosecutors began drafting kidnapping and murder charges. What he eventually admitted about the night of August 18th would change the official story of the Harrow case forever. Interrogators started with the physical evidence. They laid out photos of the container, the air system, the rental contracts, and the letters. For hours, Calvin Mercer denied everything. He said the plans were just ideas, that the letters were fiction, and that anyone could have used equipment he once rented. Agents kept the focus on dates. On the invoice from March 2001. On the August 18th, 2002 disappearance. On the exact match between his drawings and the buried structure in Pisgah. When they showed him the red cord and ring recovered from the container, his behavior shifted. According to reports, he went quiet for several minutes, then asked for water. After a brief break, he stopped claiming the bunker was imaginary. He admitted building it in stages between 2001 and early 2002. He said he wanted a controlled environment, away from people who interfere. He would not say yet who he planned to put there. Pressed on the night Ethan and Ryan vanished, Mercer gave a detailed timeline. He said he knew their routine from seeing them at the outdoor center and on nearby fire roads. On August 18th, he parked his van off a service spur and waited near the unmarked hollow. He claimed he approached them as the storm intensified, offered a ride back toward the trailhead, and then used a chemical to knock them unconscious in the van. He described driving directly to the container while thunder covered engine noise on the forest roads. Mercer also admitted one act that reshaped the original investigation. He He told agents he returned on foot to the hollow and tied a specific knot in red cord on a route there. He had watched Ryan practice that hitch on previous encounters. He knew searchers would read it as a sign the brothers had been trapped in floodwater. He wanted the case classified as a weather accident, not an abduction. Under pressure about the final outcome, Mercer said Ethan died early on after an incident in the container, but he minimized his own actions. He eventually led investigators to a remote slope miles from the bunker, where partial human remains were recovered and later identified as Ethan's. When questions turned to Ryan's fate, Mercer's answers became inconsistent, and key details started to change. In the end, prosecutors did not risk a jury on every disputed detail. In 2015, Calvin Mercer entered a plea agreement in federal court. He pleaded guilty to kidnapping resulting in death for Ethan Harrow and to kidnapping Ryan Harrow. In exchange, the government agreed not to pursue the death penalty. At sentencing, the judge imposed multiple consecutive life terms without the possibility of release. By statute, Calvin Mercer will spend the rest of his life in federal custody. The courtroom record focused on what could be proven: Ethan's remains, the bunker, the air system, the rental contracts, and the letters were laid out in sequence. Expert witnesses explained how the container had been built and how long it was likely occupied. The defense tried to frame Mercer as mentally ill and claimed Ethan's death was the result of a struggle that went too far, not a planned killing. The judge rejected that framing, citing the structure's design and the steps taken to mislead searchers in 2002. The unresolved point at the center of the case was Ryan. Mercer claimed that, years after Ethan's death, Ryan changed and stopped fighting. In one version, he said he found the hatch open and Ryan gone when he returned from a supply trip. In another, he suggested he let Ryan leave on the condition that he never contact anyone. Investigators did not believe either story. No trace of Ryan has ever appeared in financial systems, employment records, or law enforcement databases. Because no body was recovered, prosecutors could not add a murder charge for Ryan without risking the plea. Instead, the kidnapping count remained open-ended. For the Harrow family, that distinction offered little comfort. Ethan's remains were buried in a marked grave in Redford in 2016. For Ryan, there is no confirmed resting place, only a missing person case with a known abductor and no final answer. In the years after sentencing, internal reviews criticized the original 2002 search plan, the narrow grid, and the decision to treat the red knot as proof of a storm accident. Policy changes followed, including expanded search perimeters and mandatory secondary reviews in severe weather cases. Even with those corrections, one question still hangs over Pisgah National Forest whenever this case is discussed.